Okay, we'll get underway. We acknowledge the Bungalow and Kaurna people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, and pay our respects to the elders past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. So welcome everybody. We have apologies from Peter Klobuchar and a special invite to Sharon. So welcome Sharon to our meeting. We've got a little bit of meaty stuff today, so you should find it interesting.
Thank you.
Are there any conflicts of interest for the items that we are discussing today, or any changes of roles that people want to declare? No, we've got shakes of head. All right. Any of the members request a separate meeting with either auditors or management? No, all good. All right, what we're going to do, we're going to amend the agenda. Do I need a resolution for that?
Yes, would prefer so, thank you.
All right, what we're looking at doing is moving item 4.1 up the agenda, being the service reviews. The reason being, we've got Scott and Greg in the wings, and we thought we'd deal with that so we can then release them back to the wild to do their work at video. And so can I have a mover for that? Thanks, Laurie. A seconder. Thanks, Pat. All those in favour? Okay, pass. So we'll move into item 4.1, which there was the majority in the pack, and then there was a separate email that went out a little bit later in relation to the parks and gardens. So, Kathy, I might go to you.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, before we begin, if we could get a resolution to move into confidence.
Okay.
Because we'd prefer that, thank you.
All right, so I have a mover from Laurie, a seconder from Pat. All those in favour, pass. We're now in confidence. Okay, we got the minutes of the previous meeting, the 5th of February. We have the full minutes this time. Yep. That includes the cop. So thank you, management, for that. Any comments? Okay, can I have a mover? Thanks, Pat. Seconder, thanks, Laurie. All those in favour? They're approved. Okay, we'll move into 1.5, business arising. You've got some updates you want to give us there, Kathy?
Just a couple, thank you. I'll take the report as read. As you'll see, in terms of the business arising, a couple of the items have actually been concluded. So the ESCOSA advice is actually addressed in the draft and business plan and budget that is before you. And the response to that is outlined on page 58 of the agenda. Business continuity plan has actually been updated to include the Audit and Risk Committee as an escalation point and reporting role. Scenario testing is currently under development and will come through to the July Audit and Risk Committee meeting. The civic building demolition update, we have actually had a preliminary conversation with a property advisor. We're meeting with that property advisor tomorrow as well. So the draft expression of interest has been fully developed, as has an early contractor involvement document for the demolition of the building. We are and have distributed that to the property advisor for a health check in the context of advice as to whether or not this is an appropriate approach or not. The initial commentary from the property advisor is that he feels that actually it's a very reasonable plan, and that he feels that there's certainly the potential for developers to be interested in the model is there. The other preliminary conversation that I've had with him is the requirement and the need to develop a business case around whatever option it is that we actually come through. So we'll be talking further with the property advisor tomorrow in relation to that, and I can certainly provide the Audit and Risk Committee an update after that conversation as to where we go.
Who is the entity?
It is MRS Property. Andrew McIntyre is who we've been talking to. They will, depending on the outcome of the discussions tomorrow, provide a quote to us for the provision of services around this opportunity for the properties, and depending on what those costs are, and depending on other feedback that we get, we may well go out to market for a property advisor to help us with the process before we actually take any further steps in that regard.
Yeah, can I just disclose that I personally know Andrew and have had dealings with MRS at a commercial level in a previous life, but I've had no involvement in the discussions between Kathy and MRS.
Yeah, so Justin and I will be meeting with them tomorrow.
Yeah, and also we're speaking also with Renewal SA, also in relation to the EOI and the approach to market, and to get their advice, given their expertise, and looking at whether there's any opportunity to synchronise their approach to market for some of their land holdings with councils.
Good, thank you.
So once we sort of stitch that together, I would suggest that will be in the coming week or so. I'll distribute a copy of the expression of interest to audit committee members for information.
Yep.
Other than that, I'll take it as read and take any questions.
Okay, Sharon, anything from you? I know you're not really across the detail here. Is there anything from your perspective?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. The only one for me, on Appendix B, page 19, can we just include the internal audit work program, just the key activities there?
Yes, can
That
do.
just gives a final.
Yep.
And on Appendix C, can you potentially look at moving that 8th of October meeting out for a week, because you're crossing over a long weekend, and I know given when papers come out, we're encroaching on people's leisure time because of that, especially with the joint workshop with the council.
We'll certainly have a look at that. It's tied in with the consideration of the end of year financial statements and the annual report. So, yeah.
Does a week matter?
Probably not, but we'll check it.
Okay. And again, it's to make sure people got focus and priority on that. Okay. Anything at risk of non-achievement for the May meeting? Excellent. All right. Can I have a mover on that one? Thanks, Laurie. Seconder, thanks, Pat. All those in favour? That's passed. Okay. Grant, are you going to lead this discussion on the budget or annual business plan?
Yep, I'm happy to lead that. So obviously, what the audit committee have before them here is our draft annual business plan and budget for 24-25. Sort of as outlined in the report, there's already been a bit of process involved here, and some involvement of both council and the audit and risk committee through this process. So I think this year the development of the annual business plan and budget has been quite closely tied to the development of our strategic plans and some of the conversations we've had around those documents and what changes maybe were needed in there. So that has helped sort of, I guess, drive this process. Obviously, we've had a number of workshops. We've had two, at least one joint workshop of the council and elected members, maybe two. But obviously, there was also the time that the chair presented to the elected members after the last audit committee meeting. So yeah, I think as outlined in the report, we've gone through some iterations of our long-term financial plan modelling. Obviously, we've taken on the feedback received from the Audit and Risk Committee, which was very consistent with the feedback that we got from ASCOSA, and have adjusted, particularly around our capital investment program over the life of the long-term financial plan. We've adjusted some of our assumptions around future rate increases, which the Audit and Risk Committee and ASCOSA had expressed concern in that reliance there. There have been some adjustments in the short term to labour costs, noting that from year 2 we already had assumptions built in around a reduction in FTE, and that those still remain in there. And obviously, as we discussed at the last Audit and Risk Committee meeting, we know that the long-term financial plan, like the strategic plan, is sort of, we know it's in that sort of limbo-y stage where we've created that 2-speed outlook, that we know that, you know, the long-term financial plan and what it looks like a year and a half to 2 years from now may be very different from what our projections are now, but that we just have to move forward with the information and projections that we have right now. In the report, once again, we've outlined the potential for some of that income that could come online, and noting that the feedback that we've and some of the discussion we had previously, the modelling and the sensitivity analysis is around, well, based on, even if we got that extra income, only sort of 60% of it being actual an improvement in council's position, noting that, as outlined, there would be some uptick in base costs for council, service delivery, if we do start to see some of that growth, but that'll start to give some of that capacity for council as well to make some decisions around what they want to do from service delivery. So there's a difference, obviously, between, I think, the baseline service costs that go up from growth, where it's, you have to provide this extra service to more people or in more areas, or there's some infrastructure costs in there, but that council will actually then have some capacity, one, to address our current financial position, but also to start maybe looking at some of those the things we've started to strip out a little bit from our plan, being able to put some of that capacity back in capital investment, FTEs, our resource capacity, that sort of thing. So, obviously in the short term plan there, year one, we've still got a deficit, a larger deficit than we probably would like. But I think the process that that the council went through and staff administration was a good one, and I still see that we've got the plan, if you take away the airport, and we've obviously had some good discussions around the airport here today. Council without the airport, the projections are, I think, a lot less concerning than they maybe previously have been, and especially what we were looking at 12 months ago, and especially based on the fact that it's actually based on lower rate increases to get those projections. So it's taken some of the risk out of it. The airport is definitely still the main risk that faces council financially. There is some, I didn't speak up earlier. I think this was probably the time to have some of those discussions, but from my perspective, I've put some conversation in there around the airport. I see it as, if we got to sort of 90 to 100,000 passengers per year, without a big change in the passenger levy, that's where we would be probably in a okay position. We maybe wouldn't be break even, but we've noted previously, and the audit committee have noted that we could probably run a $100,000 to $200,000 deficit for the airport, noting that our funding requirements, that the funding we got for our terminal sort of requires that. But I think that would be a financially sustainable position for the airport, noting that is higher than our pre-COVID levels by about sort of 10 to 15%. But that if we got anywhere near that, so even if we got to our pre-COVID levels of 80,000, then you could start to tweak the passenger levy without having to put it up significantly, and that's when it's probably a different conversation. At the moment, you sort of need to double the passenger levy to get anywhere near a financially sustainable position, and that is probably going to start having some impact on passenger numbers, you would imagine. I do know the comment earlier that would that actually have an impact on passenger numbers with elasticity and the users, but I think you've got to keep in mind that we did add a $45 per departing passenger levy in the last year, and it feels like it's having some impact on our passenger numbers with the impact on the flow-on impact on pricing. So it's the fact that we would be adding another jump on top of what we've already done. I think maybe if the security screening was off the table and we weren't even having that conversation, I think the conversation around the passenger levy might, and a significant increase in it, might be different. So I think hopefully that covers a lot of it. That there's obviously we've made sure to include sensitivity analysis around some key items in there. So that was, like I've already spoke about, the growth, also CPI, and what might happen there. The plan is a little bit sensitive to CPI in the short term because our next two EB increases are fixed and aren't linked to CPI. Sort of, if there was a change in CPI from our assumed 4.2% for March, the rate increase can only sort of change about half of what the CPI increase might be in either direction. And that's and the last one is just showing the impact of different rate increases. You know, we obviously started with a 5.8% rate increase when we started this process. We brought that down to 5% during that review of the long-term financial plan assumptions and projections. We've included in there, you know, what a 4.2% increase looks like in line with the assumed CPI, and that starts to really limit some of that that build back of to a break-even position and pushes that out. And then there's showing what a 0% rate increase would do, and really that pushes break-even out to the end of the plan, basically. So, yeah, that's all included for information and discussion, and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Grant. I note that in May we'll get the re-engineering options if profit doesn't or deficit does move. It would have been good to have it in this pack, but note that we'll get it next month on that. Sharon, I'm going to come to you last because you've been a bit more involved in some of those budget discussions. I'm going to go to Laurie first.
Yeah, look, most of this stuff we've sort of gone through. There's not a lot of new stuff, but my question was, given that we're using capital value as the basis for looking at our rates, and there's a number that are going to go up and there's a number that are going to go down, and in particular the ones that look like they're going down are industry, vacant land holders. Is there scope, and I don't know if we can or not, but is there scope to either keep them flat or give them a small amount by saying, if industry is the key user of airport and we're using any difference there, to give them an airport charge or something like that to help to offset the shortfall of airport revenue, because they wouldn't see the difference otherwise. I mean, if my rates stayed flat or 5% across the board for that sector, so what? It's consistent with the average across the board. And I'm just questioning whether A, there's any flexibility in actually enabling us to do that, and B, whether it makes sense rather than having that sector, which is the one which is effectively being subsidised for use of the airport, getting a deduction or a reduction in rates, rather than having them help contribute to the thing. So that's page 84.
Yeah, so I'm just getting there. Justin, do you want to comment on
Get
that?
Grant to respond in the first instance, Chair, if that's
Okay, sure. So is there an opportunity there?
Yeah, look, we did leave some flexibility in the rating policy. The challenge, I think, there is we've set quite a high differential for industry already. So industry are paying 3 times the rate in the dollar of residential, and that was what we consulted on and through the process. If you look across the sector, that's probably quite a high differential for just normal industry. Obviously, Whyalla probably has some unique qualities in that space. There's definitely some space to move up. I don't think we would be wanting to tweak it too much, but I'll be undertaking the detailed rate modelling probably this week, because I've actually, like, the actual valuation data has come through this morning. So definitely, if that's a thought, we could see how much that would need to change to maybe get a slightly different outcome, noting that that would just take the pressure off another rating group. The theory of the move to capital value being that we don't raise any extra rates from that, and the 5% general rate increase is the total rate increase. But yes, if that's particular.
I think Laurie's position was more we would book the benefit, not the transfer back to ratepayers. Laurie, is what I was reading you were saying.
And effectively, they're getting the benefit of our loss in the airport area, and if they're the majority user, there is no. To me, it's a very easily justifiable hold flat or more, and you're helping to contribute to keep the airport operating for your benefit.
Yeah, I think that's a question to pose back to council, because they've made in their methodology, one of them is no increase or no profiteering, if I can put it that way, from the change, and that would be a profiteering from the council point of view. So that would be a consideration point. Are this group potentially carved out?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it profiteering. I'd call it offsetting.
It's redistribution.
When I'm talking profiteering in the broader sense,
it would change
from the rate change.
It would change the conversation though around the rating, because what council have to communicate to each year is what our general rate increase is, and that general rate increase has to be the rates raised this year versus last year. So that would, if we upped the differential for industry and didn't change anything else, it would actually change the conversation point around what our general rate increase is. And I think council have been, this is my position on it, and based on the feedback I've received, I don't think council want to be able to have to communicate a higher general rate increase than 5%, and that would change that communication piece. Because
well, again, if we just take that there's a piece of feedback for it to be considered, is that an option to have a zero decrease for industry based on usage of airport consideration? Laurie, do you want to keep going?
No, that probably, as I said, the rest of it we've been through, and I think it's there's nothing there that stands out from my perspective.
Think extra, I don't think.
Sharon?
As you said, we've had lots of discussions, lots of backwards and forwards and modelling, and Paul Grant's given us 101 different versions of what we've asked for, and I'm fairly happy with what we've come up with and what Grant's got in there. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I am curious though to see, based on what Laurie's just said, what that might look like.
I think about 60 grand.
Well, if you look at vacant land as well, there's another a couple hundred there as well.
Yeah, no, I was just looking at industry. So if you go to page 64, 84, sorry.
Yeah.
You can see it's the difference between industry and vacant land of current fee and proposed fee.
Yeah, okay. No worries, thank you.
You do the calculation there.
Yeah.
Okay. From my perspective, I'm generally comfortable with it. We've had that large discussion. I would caution this, it's not a vibe, but a feel I'm getting for let's keep excluding airport out of underlying. In the end, the council's wearing the cost of the airport and the debt of the airport. And at some stage, that's got to come back into the frame. We can't keep saying, let's just push it to the side, because in the end, you own the debt and you own the asset. And that's good to me. Once we go through this next stage, that will have to come into frame as part of considering overall performance of council. It can't be keep carving out. And even using terms like debt forgiveness, I think is dangerous, because it gives that mindset that somebody else is wearing this, the council owns it, and therefore the ratepayers own the debt as well on that one. So just a word of caution there.
Can I support that? It was a feeling I had all through that you're just throwing out the airport, and I understand the issue of transparency and acknowledging the impact that particular thing is having on council, and the feedback you've previously got about identifying that separately. But you can't just identify it separately and leave it there. You've got to identify it separately and then go, and what are we going to do about it? Well, we've had a discussion today about things that can be done about it, but it potentially puts you in the feel that you're in a more comfortable position than you actually are if you just go, well, that's over there, because that's over there, but we are responsible for it as well. So.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Page 29, I look at the cost savings summary, and I get you've built a churn rate in there, and you would be achieving a churn rate at the moment for vacant positions. I get your building stock. I think your operational savings is a little bit skinny on a stretch target. Having been a chief executive and a CFO, I know what these numbers normally sit like. And I think rather than 25,000, they should be up around the $250,000 mark as a stretch target. I know you shake your head, but you look at.
Happy for you to have a look at the nature and type.
I don't want to run the business, but again, or we note that anything to do with the service reviews are on top of, so the benefit is not baked into there. But I think 25 grand's a bit skinny on a budget of that size. And again, I don't want to open the cover on your numbers. You guys run the business. It's just a general comment of where I've seen organisations push for efficiency dividends in organisations. So that's a comment. But I think if we do note that any benefit from a service charge, and some of those are from the reviews, because the reviews may actually come at a cost as well, have got to sit outside of where the budget sits. Just let me catch up on my finger moving. Okay, so I think we've got a couple of comments there. And I think we're supportive of the budget. Back to the council, which is good. Well done, Grant, and all the work, and to Justin as well as Kathy in relation to what's gone in here. I think it's got a very fine focus. I think narrowing your focus and priority is going to help you going forward and around that decision making, and subject to including of those couple of comments that we've got. And again, that's opinion. Council can do with it as they need to. I'll just check that all your numbers line up as well. I'll just show you a couple of pages where I don't think they line up if you're going to go out. We're happy to move that recommendation. So thank you, Laurie. Second to Pat. Sorry, Sharon, did I ask you? I did? Oh, okay. Just had a seniors moment. Just had a seniors moment there. We'll make that recommendation. So that one is passed. Thank you. Well done. Okay. We're going to move into confidence again. Verbal update in council business.
I think we probably have nothing to update in either of the next two items. The primary conversations that we've had around the service reviews and the annual business plan and budget is in effect. The update on council business, etc.
Okay, so anybody want any comments on anything? Laurie?
Thank you.
Sharon?
No, all good from me.
Okay, just a couple of things you may want to consider. I know Adelaide City Council are going through their issues at the moment, and something maybe worthwhile is either the key decision maker within that council coming to talk to the Whyalla Council on lessons learned. So what were the flags? What did they do? Or what did they ignore? And now the position they're in at the moment, because I know they're going through a range of issues around the management of that organisation. But it just helps from an understanding of some of the issues they went through. Not saying we're going through the same issues.
Referring to their turning around their financial challenges or their political/governance challenges.
I'm saying let's go financial, and you can always ask questions when you've got somebody in a room of how they got in the position they got into. And the other option is also to having somebody like a Con Mikalakis coming, who's the Deputy Chief Investment Officer for Host Plus, coming to talk to the council to understand why would people, what are some of the conditions around investment in community. So when they go in and invest in places like Morphettville and so forth, what are some of the key considerations they go in? Because I think it helps the council understand what are some of those parameters that need to be there from a commercialisation point of view and opportunities point of view as an education session. So just a couple of things you may want to consider. And I can make the introduction with Con. Okay. We have no motions with notice. We have none without. Next meeting.
Just to say, in terms of the item around the service reviews, we didn't get a mover and a seconder for noting the conversations.
Okay, let's go back to an hour ago. Can I have a mover? Thanks, Pat, and a seconder. Thanks, Laurie. Everybody in favour? Passed. Okay, that did happen.
It did.
It did. Okay, next meeting is the 13th of May. I'll close the meeting.